A telltale sign that Trump's campaign is not just flailing, but imploding, is that he's now taking heat from Republicans just a few weeks out from the election. Let's take the most egregious first. Here he is on stage with Laura Ingraham of Fox News during what should have been the softest of softball interviews, but because Trump is physically incapable of not spewing out lies one after the next, even Ingraham was forced to fact-check him on air.
They're offering people $750
for immediate needs.
For the worst, yeah, but for the worst hurricane that anybody's seen. She should be there. She should be, I would say, North Carolina is bad, is so bad. And
she was there today for 3 hours, I believe, Kamala Harris.
Despite the ease with which Trump tries to lie, the $750 is the first grant given by FEMA. It's intended to get you money immediately so that you have instant cash to buy necessities. Food, drinks, diapers, formula, toiletries, medicine. FEMA even disputed what Trump said, posting this on the agency's website, calling Trump's false claims a rumor and explaining the initial payment, which again is the same for everybody. It's also an increase, by the way, from the $500 of initial funds that was distributed during the Trump administration. From there, FEMA is meeting with those impacted on an individualized basis to determine how much to allocate for repair costs, up to a maximum of $42,500. And that's a point, by the way, that Pete Buttigieg made during a recent interview with me.
There are funds that give people an immediate check for help, about $700 for things like food, diapers. But that doesn't mean that's all that they get. It means that it's the first most immediate source of support. And what's extremely troubling, again, is to see this benefit that's going to people, this way of helping people, somehow twisted and used for what I can only assume are political purposes. And look, none of this is helping the responders who are actually on the ground. It is extraordinary and inspiring what's happening. We are seeing first responders getting through to people even as their own communities have been impacted. We're seeing extraordinary efforts coordinating different kinds of agencies, law enforcement, firefighters, the military troops that President Biden deployed to the area to try to help. I've seen amazing examples of what's being done.
As for Trump's claim that Kamala Harris should be in North Carolina, on the day that interview between Trump and Laura Ingraham took place, she was. Granted, maybe that didn't make the news because she didn't decide to, I don't know, throw paper towels at people, but there's more to visiting disaster areas than turning it into a show, or in Trump's case, a circus. Sometimes leaders actually care about helping people rather than exploiting a tragedy to bask in the spotlight, although I wouldn't expect Donald Trump to understand such a foreign concept. And if Laura Ingraham wasn't a close enough ally of Trump, perhaps these people are.
Here's his vice president.
Anyone who puts themselves over the Constitution should never be president of the United States.
I cannot in good conscience endorse Donald Trump this year.
His defense secretary.
Do you think Trump can be trusted with the nation's secrets ever again?
No. I mean, it's just irresponsible action that places our service members at risk, places our nation's security at risk.
His national security advisor.
Donald Trump will cause a lot of damage. The only thing he cares about is Donald Trump.
And the nation's former highest-ranking military officer.
We don't take an oath to a king or a queen or to a tyrant or a dictator. We don't take an oath to a wannabe dictator.
Not for nothing, but when this many members of a cabinet refuse to endorse the guy who hired them, perhaps that should serve as a blinking red light for the rest of the country. These aren't just casual staffers. These are his own cabinet members. These are Trump's direct reports. These are the people who work closest to him. And all of them are repeating the same warning that Trump is a danger to this country and that he's not looking out for our best interests, he's looking out for his own. In fact, far from just refusing to endorse Trump, Republicans have come out to affirmatively endorse Harris.
In this election, a broad coalition has come together to support Vice President Kamala Harris. Now, we may disagree on some things, but we are bound together by the one thing that matters to us as Americans more than any other, and that's our duty to our Constitution and our belief in the miracle and the blessing of this incredible nation. So today I ask all of you here and everyone listening across this great country to join us. I ask you to meet this moment. I ask you to stand in truth, to reject the depraved cruelty of Donald Trump. And I ask you instead to help us elect Kamala Harris for president.
And I know we've become inured to Republicans like Liz Cheney coming out in support of Harris, but I should probably remind you that it is not normal for one of the most conservative former members of Congress to endorse a San Francisco Democrat for president. I understand that these are such unprecedented times, but we should probably take stock of the fact that Liz Cheney and Dick Cheney, a literal Republican vice president, and countless other Republicans are screaming from the rooftops that Donald Trump cannot be allowed to take power again. And it's not difficult to figure out why. Take just one of these latest stories about Trump.
Bob Woodward has a new book. He alleges former President Donald Trump secretly kept in touch with Russian President Vladimir Putin even after Donald Trump left office. The two have spoken as many as 7 times since he left the White House, all while Donald Trump was pressuring Republicans in Congress to block military aid to Ukraine. NBC News has not independently confirmed the new details laid out in that book, but that is what Woodward is writing.
While Donald Trump was still president, Bob Woodward writes that Vladimir Putin, who did not go and travel abroad for 19 months, was highly concerned about contracting the virus himself. And in conversations with Donald Trump, the current Republican president of the United States, went on to, as Bob Woodward writes, secretly sent Putin a bunch of Abbott point-of-care COVID test machines for his personal use as the virus spread rapidly through Russia.
In other words, we were burying Americans in mass graves, and nurses were wearing garbage bags to work, and Trump was sending COVID testing machines to Vladimir Putin. Here's Harris's response to that during an interview with radio host Howard Stern.
Everybody was scrambling to get these kits, the tests, the COVID test kits.
You couldn't get them.
Couldn't get them.
Right.
Couldn't get them anywhere.
Right.
And this guy who is president of the United States is sending them to Russia, to a murderous dictator for his personal use? The point being, that is just the most recent, stark example of who Donald Trump is, that he secretly sent COVID test kits for the personal use of Putin, of Russia, an adversary to the United States, when he was talking about Americans should be putting bleach in their blood.
And okay, we know that Vice President Harris doesn't approve of Trump's alleged relationship with Putin, but here's his former deputy press secretary who has come out in support of Harris.
During the pandemic, Americans who are suffering and dying because of this once-in-a-lifetime pandemic, and people couldn't get a hold of tests. But what does he do? He's not sending them to the American people. He's sending them to our adversary, a dictator and a murderer, Vladimir Putin. And that just goes to show you that he's buddy-buddy with someone like that because he admires dictators. He wants to emulate them, and he's even said so, that he would be a dictator on day one. And I know a lot of Republicans love to say, oh, Trump's just kidding. Well, my pushback to that is, who jokes about that? What kind of American president jokes about being a dictator on day one? And I think that it just shows how cozy their relationship is, and that's been one of my points of contention with him, actually, beyond the things that I have disagreed with him about January 6th. As you mentioned, I testified against him in front of the January 6th committee because I believe he's unfit for a lot of reasons. But another thing is this relationship he has with Putin.
When these Republicans say that Donald Trump is a threat to our national security, it's probably owed to the fact that he is so desperate to be in the autocrat club that I think he would sell our country out in a heartbeat if it means he could get a pat on the head from someone like Putin. So don't just heed my warnings. Listen to what Trump's own party is saying about him. Listen to how they have to correct him and fact-check him. Listen to how they warn about his misplaced loyalties. Listen to how they recognize how incompetent and dangerous he is. When the people who know him best are telling us to watch out, that's when we should probably listen. Before you go, to see more content from MSNBC, make sure to subscribe to this channel by clicking the link right here on this screen. And you can also follow the link to see some exclusive content only on TikTok.